Jesus freak here. Ah, the curse of an east-facing window, where even during the daytime it's not bright enough to shoot a video without internal lighting. The clock's an hour fast. So I've occasionally mentioned and this release is from 7 years ago. Between 2007 and 2012, I did work on a translation of the New Testament, which I published at the end of 2012. And I tweaked it a couple times since then. I figured, maybe a couple people read it. Overall, it'll land with a thud, no one care. So when I see when I see someone actually evangelizing it, so to speak, and I wind up trying to downplay it because, as I'm like, it's just my own personal translation, and it's really not even all that good. So it's actually starting to get out there, and I'm starting to worry. Maybe I should, a couple of years ago I thought of giving it a thorough cleanup pass, which I never really had the chance to do. Tone down some of the eccentricities. I'm like, I better actually, do that. Because people start to actually use it. The issues with the translation, which I've been very open about. It won't matter if there's no eyes on it, but if people start to read it, it could be a bit of an issue. I've started to tweak a few things. For example, some of the more eccentric wording or the inconsistent way I referred to currencies. And there were a few places where I had read the Latin wrong or where I had translated from the Vulgate and pulled something in that probably shouldn't have been. For example, Revelation 22:14 in my translation as it originally stood said, "Blessed are those who wash their robes in the blood of the Lamb, such that they may have access to the tree of life and enter through the gates into the city." And I later learned that the blood of the Lamb bit was an intrusion from another verse, something that in other places I had been rather careful about. So I dropped the phrase, "in the blood of the Lamb." And there were a couple cases where I wasn't able to fully understand. I could get the general gist of things, and in a lot of cases I didn't need help. But when I needed help, I referred to the Challoner and to the King James. And occasionally I got it wrong for this reason. two particular examples of this. Philippians 3:20 had the phrase in the old text, "For our activity is in heaven," which I changed to "For our citizenship is in heaven," because I had misunderstood an antiquated English usage in the KJV, which I couldn't have understood the Latin at the time either, so I fell back to the KJV. And there was another one. I need to find I think my Crudens is on the other side of the room, so I'm going to try to see if I can find what I'm looking for in a smaller concordance. Because it's a pretty obscure usage of a word. Well, it wasn't obscure then, but it is now. Yep. I had misunderstood a word in Ephesians 1. And I had translated it, and I had interpreted it in the light of the KJV, not understanding the word in the KJV. The word was earnest. And you're probably familiar with this verse, Ephesians 1:14, which is the earnest of our inheritance until the redemption of the purchased possession unto the praise of his glory. And I had misunderstood earnest because I had never seen it used in that sense, and I didn't understand the Latin word because I had nothing in a modern language to compare it to. And this was before I realized that Wiktionary actually has a comprehensive Latin section. So I had, who is the earnestness of our inheritance until the... And, I got it wrong. So... More recently, that is to say today, I fixed the translation and says, "Who is the down payment of our inheritance until the redemption of the acquired possession in the praise of his glory." Now, there's a saying in the open source world, many eyes make all bugs shallow. In other words, it's easier to find problems if more people are looking at them. This is a problem with a one-man job. And the reason that in general we usually reject one-man translations, there's usually good reason to do so. If the translator has a theological axe to grind, such as the guy who did the Living Bible paraphrase, he had a theological axe to grind and it showed up in his work. Or the guy who's doing the so-called Passion Translation, or George Lamsa, who supposedly translated the Bible out of Aramaic. These are people who had an axe to grind and showed up in their work. Or who were, from wacky sects and produced cult Bibles. I mentioned the Passion Translation because it's in the same line as the Joseph Smith translation. That's not an exaggeration. But now that people are actually looking at my work, I need to correct it. The The biggest issue that my translation had is the closest I know to Latin is actually Spanish. And I don't know Greek at all. But I did it alone. What used to be a sort of bragging point is now becoming a liability. That's why I'm downplaying my own work. Since I actually know at least one person who's capable of trying to help me fix the problems, I should probably stop trying to entirely rely on myself here. There will be a 4th edition. It's just a matter of time. It has to be done. Jesus freak out.